Patrick Mahomes' 2022 stats are absolutely insane. And yet, despite all the MVP talk, everyone's focus has now shifted to one big question. Is Mahomes overrated? Well, the answer to that isn't as straightforward as you'd think. After all, in spite of all the flack he's been getting, the guy is still leading the league with 41 touchdowns, which in and of itself should be impressive enough to land you in contention for the MVP award. Not to mention, he's also ahead of everyone else in terms of most yards. In fact, at 5,250 pass yards, the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback is in a league of his own. As the second player on the list, Justin Herbert is sitting at 4,739 yards. On top of that, even the majority of sportsbooks have him at number 2 to win MVP. So in theory, he should be on top of everyone's list, right? What's up with all this talk of him being overrated then?
We prepare ourselves every year from training camp in St. Joe's, Missouri to be here, but it takes a day-by-day process, and I think the coaches preach that, the players do that, and the organization around us supports us in that mission.
Well, you could perhaps chalk it down to one very obvious reason. He's set the bar too high for his own good. Yep, Mahomes, who's been a world beater in the NFL for a while now, is racing against himself. I mean, just look at his first year as a starter in Kansas. Throwing for 5,000 yards and having 50 touchdowns is insane in and of itself. But to do that while averaging 9.6 yards per attempt, now you're just in unsustainable territory. Like, you get the point, right? He hit such an impressive peak back in 2018 that it's almost impossible to replicate that for him now. And this in turn has made people expect way too much from him. So much that even when he's still a cut above the rest of the field, he finds himself getting criticized on a daily basis. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are plenty of reasons to think he's overrated. At the same time, I can't name any player other than perhaps Lamar Jackson who even comes close to Mahomes' level of playmaking. Like, the dude can literally play the ball on every mark of the field from any spot in the backfield. And I don't know about you, but that's clearly some superhuman ability. But again, as I've mentioned earlier too, the star quarterback's got flaws in his game too. In fact, while I'm sure everyone loves the way he can contort his arm in all sorts of different ways for his throws, this also introduces another issue that big stats may not show. Mahomes' game is way too gimmicky. Okay, lower your pitchforks down for a bit and hear me out. He's made 41 touchdowns this season, right? Of course, that's really impressive. But when you look deeper, you'll realize that 18 of them have come from a 1 to 5 yard range.
My dad and mom, neither one were disappointed. They always told me, whatever I do, just be the best you can and do the best you can at it. And so whenever I was choosing football and baseball, which one I was going with, they told me to make my decision and run with it.
Oh, and if that isn't good enough for you, hear this one out, cause it gets worse. Guess how many of his touchdowns are in the 6 to 10 yard range? 12. Like, you get where this is going, right? The point is that despite having over 40 touchdowns this season, he was 0 in the 20 to 25 yard range. Not to mention, even when you consider the 6 he's got in 20 to 50, 4 of them actually came from escape drill plays. So essentially, the record doesn't look that impressive anymore when you break it down that way. Of course, I'm not saying he's bad or anything. In fact, I'd say he still deserves to be in the MVP conversations. But if you were to play the devil's advocate, it'd be very easy to point these things out. As a matter of fact, let's add some more stuff on top of this. Okay, for instance, he's just been notoriously late while throwing the ball and always misses the right timing. Not to mention, despite being on a stacked Chiefs roster, he's only got a single Super Bowl ring. Oh, and speaking of Super Bowls, he's only passed for 2 touchdowns in his 2 appearances, which just isn't good enough. That being said, despite all the criticism, it's also very easy to dismiss this notion by making one simple argument. No quarterback has accomplished as much as Mahomes so quickly. I mean, sure, he may not be the most quote-unquote efficient player. At the same time, does he even need to be? Like, the guy is already doing more than enough for the Chiefs to be considered one of the greats.
100%. She's killed me with the workouts, especially at the beginning. Here, let me show you how I've been working out. The amount of reps, is unreal. Like, I have to stop doing all the reps sometimes. Resistance bands, kettlebells.
Oh, and remember, he hasn't even been in the scene for that long. Seriously, you can criticize him all you want, but at the end of the day, his numbers don't lie. Sure, he's not at the incredible peak he was hitting a couple of years ago, but consider this. Defenses have also played him differently over the past year, with more too high safeties. Not to mention, teams rarely send extra pass rushers and make sure that at least 4 players are secretly attacking him. And when you're able to bring that sort of terror out of teams, you know you're doing something right. Besides, even with this added challenge, he took the Chiefs really far with him. So much so that they were in the running at the end of the season for the best record in their conference. Not to mention, they also got super close to a 3rd consecutive Super Bowl appearance. Remember, that sort of thing is not normal these days. In fact, even Tom Brady didn't pull this off until he was in his 40s. Who cares if he didn't match his peak seasons? Does that make him a bad player? Certainly not. Besides, people forgot that Mahomes is only 27. That's still pretty young. That being said, there is one startling stat about his age that may blow your mind. Yep, Mahomes is AFC's oldest quarterback in the playoffs. No, seriously, in spite of being only 27, he's surrounded by much younger company. He doesn't mind being the old head, though. In fact, he thinks of it as a positive, as according to him, it just shows the amount of talent they've got in the American Football Conference. What's more, he said that the younger guys around him are gonna be here for a long time, so he's gonna have to be the old guy for a while too. Though, weirdly enough, this also gives him an advantage over all the younger quarterbacks around him. Of course, it's an experience. Now, talking about a 27-year-old using his experience against the opposition sounds wild, but that's just how things are in the postseason, and he thinks he can actually use this extra experience to outsmart the opposition. Though we've got to remember, Mahomes hasn't even fully reached his peak yet. In fact, if anything, he's almost hitting the early portion of his prime. Plus, he's also seen plenty of elite action and has achieved so much in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, I did not want to go, and they kind of gave me the ultimatum of I wasn't going back in unless I went in there. So they're trying to take care of me. We got a lot of great people over here, but it's going to take a lot to keep me out of a football game.
This puts him in a very unique position because even though he's young, you could say he's got more valuable experience than even some of his older peers. Not to mention, he's also got a Super Bowl ring. Like, the guy is not going anywhere and is gonna be a major part of the Chiefs' explosive squad for the foreseeable future. What's more, he's also got a real shot of winning the Super Bowl for the 2nd time as well. And of course, that would also guarantee all the All-Pro honors at quarterback and a 2nd NFL MVP award. Oh, and guess what? He says that he'll cherish these things even more this time around. After all, he's now been through the trials and struggles of losing Super Bowls and AFC Championship games. So in a way, he's just got a greater appreciation for these wins and awards now. All right, well that's it for Mahomes' MVP chances, his style of play, and his postseason strategy. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.